Okay, let me adjust a little bit. Let me see. Okay, it's not so bad. How are you? Good evening. I'm back for more unhinged bedtime stories. Okay, I think we're good. Okay, so last night I read some unhinged bedtime stories from A Wolverine is Eating My Leg by Tim Cahill. This is one of my favorite books. Just a bunch of weird short stories, strange happenings, strange situations, weird shit that the author got himself into. It's a little noisy outside. Yeah, so last night I read a story about a guy who found himself naked on a trail when a bunch of children walked by and he had to hide. And then I read a story about, it was two stories kind of juxtaposed together, I guess. It was the author's experience of an eclipse and at the same time thinking about a guy who got stuck under a bunch of ice while he was snowplowing. So today, ooh, okay, let's see. This one is called, this one calls to me. It's called The Marquesas, Beauty, Terror, and Sublime Seclusion. Let me see how long this is. But that sounds interesting. That sounds very intriguing. The beauty and terror juxtaposed together are kind of a thing that's been on my mind a lot lately. It's not that long. So I think I'm gonna read that one. Do you ever think about that? Like the way beauty and terror kind of like coexist in like strange ways. I think about that a lot. Like it's like the Grand Canyon. So I've never been to the Grand Canyon, but it's like this huge gaping pit. Or like I went to a volcano once and it was like this huge crater that I stood on the edge of. And sometimes I think of like, God, this is so beautiful, but also it's terrifying. Like if this volcano were to erupt right now, that would be terrifying. But it's also beautiful. It's like creating new earth, but it's also like scorching everything in its path. So like I don't know, those two things are very closely intertwined, I feel like. I think about that a lot. Okay, anyway, the story. The Marquesas, Beauty, Terror, and Sublime Seclusion. Okay. But I reconfirmed with you personally, I said. 3 times. The woman from Air Polynesia shook her head sadly. We have no record of your reconfirmation. But I was here. I talked to you. 2 days ago, you said I was on the flight. The woman showed me a handwritten list. There were 5 names on it, and mine was not among them. You see? The woman said patiently. We have no record of your reconfirmation. Outside the office, the island of Hiva sighed under the weight of a heavy tropical sun. In the shade of the mango trees, the air itself was golden, as sweet and thick as honey. The sea was the cobalt blue of deep water, and it glittered in the hard, brittle light of unfiltered sun. Breakers 8 feet high thundered onto an expansive beach of black volcanic sand. Above the town of Atuona, above the tiny airline office, volcanic peaks rose in immense green velvet spires that caught and collected drifting South Pacific clouds so that the rain fell on various summits. And the high peaks shimmered in impressionistic shades of blue and gray. There were worse places to be stranded, to be sure, but few that are farther from home. Hiva is the southern administrative center for the Marquesas Island Group, which is about 1,000 miles from anywhere, 3,500 miles west of Peru, 2,500 miles southeast of Hawaii, 740 miles northeast of Tahiti. The Marquesas, a part of French Polynesia, are in fact the most remote islands on the face of the earth. The island group that's farthest from any continent. This isolation makes tourism rare, and as a consequence, a visit to the islands is rewarding and frustrating in equal measure. You should reconfirm for next week's flight, the woman said brightly. There was, of course, no reason to believe that another series of reconfirmations would be recorded. Ordinarily, in such a situation, I might be tempted to batter my way onto the flight using journalistic clout. However, claiming that I was a big deal travel writer from the United States would cut no ice whatsoever in Atuona, where there are exactly 3 tourist bungalows. The accommodations are more a matter of Polynesian courtesy than an attempt to cash in on big tourist bucks. You could, the woman suggested, go out to the airport. Maybe one of the confirmed passengers won't show up. In another country, I could possibly bribe one of the 5 passengers, offer a free ticket next week to anyone willing to give up a seat. After spending several weeks in the Marquesas, however, I knew better than to try. The islands are so provident, so rich in game and fruit, that reasonably able folks can live quite well off the land itself. This produces a cavalier attitude toward cash. Money is best spent on toys, luxury items, travel. Our Marquesan might give up a seat on the plane because he or she liked me or felt sorry for me, but never for money. At the airport, all 5 passengers showed up for the flight. I was destined, it appeared, to enjoy the Marquesas for another week, or more. There was just enough money left to rent one of the bungalows in Atuona. Oh well, I could hang out on the Black Beach, drink cheap rum, do a lot of writing, hard-hitting, sinewy, romantic stuff, full of adventure. The Marquesas have always been a good place for this sort of creative work. Herman Melville and Robert Louis Stevenson both lived for a time on the northern island of Nuku, Hiva. Belgian-born singer and songwriter Jacques Brel moved to Hiva to live the last years of his life when he discovered he had cancer. Paul Gauguin came to Atuona in 1900, looking for inspiration in uncorrupted savagery. Gauguin and Brel are buried in a small cemetery on a hillside overlooking the town of Atuona. Most of the graves there are draped with seashell necklaces and are neatly tended. Brel's stone features a bas relief of the man. Gauguin's simple grave is headed by a sculpted female figure, Oviri, a disturbing, hollow-eyed symbol of the savagery the painter hoped to find in the Marquesas. A plumeria tree grows beside the figure of Oviri. At the airport, I found myself thinking about these graves as a small, single-prop plane took off without me. The day I visited the cemetery, Gauguin's plumeria tree had been in full and fragrant bloom. It had bothered me then that roots surely must protrude into the grave itself. Now, standing alone on a vacant airstrip, 740 miles from anywhere, I began to think of those profuse and fragile white plumerias as an expression of the artist's soul. It was a romantic and melancholy thought. Perhaps I would be buried in that pleasant cemetery along with Gauguin and Brel. My tombstone would read, Tim Cahill. We had no record of his reconfirmation. The Marquesas Islands are volcanic peaks that rise 2,000 to 4,000 feet above the surface of the ocean. 6 of the islands are inhabited, and the population stands at about 6,000. Hiva is the administrative center of a southeast cluster of islands, while Nuku, the main island, is the economic and administrative center of a northwest group. The single weekly flight from Tahiti lands at Nuku, where the first-time visitor is immediately introduced to the difficulty of travel in the Marquesas. Nukuhiva's airstrip is on the northeast shoulder of the island, in a dry, rolling grassland that looks something like the wind-whipped high plains of Wyoming, and is called Terre Déserte, deserted land, because little that is edible grows there. The main town, Taiohae, lies directly over the spine of mountains that bisects the island, and a dirt road runs from the airport to the village. It is a narrow, dangerous, sometimes boggy affair, a twisting, rock-strewn washboard of a road in which every other turn features heart-stopping drop-offs. The rutted path passes near the highest point on Nuku Hiva, 3,865-foot-high Mount Kitu. It is probably less than 30 miles to Taiohai from the deserted land, and the drive takes all day. Anyone in a hurry takes the ferry, a clattering 60-foot twin diesel vessel that docks at a small cove called Ha'apoli. Boarding the ferry is an adventure itself, because the Marquesas are volcanic in origin. The islands simply erupted out of the empty ocean. They are not protected by a fringing reef, and the full force of the Pacific Ocean batters them ceaselessly. There is no breakwater at Ha'apoli, which means that the ferry, docked at a small cement pier, rises and falls as much as 8 feet on swells and breakers. Passengers try to step aboard as the deck rises to the level of the dock. To stumble at this point could be catastrophic. A passenger in the water would be crushed between the lurching boat and the cement dock. It takes about 2 hours to get to Taiohei, and the boat sails by rocky cliffs crusted with ancient lava that rise 800 feet above the surface of the sea. Oceanic swells explode into polished rock. The thunder and spray of high sea meeting solid rock is a constant spectacle. Water rises against the rock in immense sheets, reaching 25 feet or more, like moving molten silver under the high tropical sun. There was no one living above those cliffs on the deserted land, and Nuku Hiva was as it always had been, as it was 2,000 years ago when the first of the people who were to become Marquesans landed on the island. They had come out of the west in dugouts filled with coconuts, breadfruit, chickens, pigs, dogs, and heroes. Okay, I'm going to stop the story for 1 minute. Have you ever eaten breadfruit? Okay, the first time I got in Hawaii, I found hummus made of breadfruit, and it's the best thing I've ever tasted in my life. Okay, if you ever get the chance to eat hummus made with breadfruit, I highly recommend it. Breadfruit by itself isn't my favorite, but when you mix it with other stuff, chef's kiss. Okay, now back to our regularly scheduled story. Okay, they had come out of the west in dugouts filled with coconuts, breadfruit, chickens, pigs, dog, and heroes. The people, the first Polynesians, ranged as far south as New Zealand. As far north as Hawaii, the Marquesans are the farthest east they came, and the Marquesans' mystic culture, terrifying, brutal, and beautiful, developed in the splendid isolation of these most lonely of Polynesian islands. As the boat rounds a point by the bay of Hakaui, and moves to the windward side of Nuku Hiva, the scenery begins a sledgehammer assault on the sense. The mountains rise, sheer, impossibly green, and waterfalls thunder down the drainages, carving out narrow valleys where the people live. The valleys are separated one from another by high, vegetation-choked ridges. In the time before the first European Americans visited the Marquesas, the people who lived along the streams in those valleys called themselves the Men. Their coconut and breadfruit thrived in the fertile volcanic soil. The chickens and pigs multiplied beyond counting. Feasting was a way of life. There were feasts for marriage and death and birth, and the men, to Western eyes, were among the most beautiful people on the face of the earth. Art was integral to the life of the men. They carved human images of wood and filigreed tiny representative scenes on ear ornaments and tortoiseshell fan handles. Males sometimes decorated their entire bodies with tattoos in contrasting bands of light and dark, in swirling circular patterns that followed the contour of a buttock, the curve of the biceps or thighs. There were ritual tattoos that marked the large events of life, such as puberty and marriage. Since the process of tattooing was extremely painful, the colors were made of ground candle nut, ash, and water, and were generally applied with sharpened piece of bone. Some body decorations were simply signs of courage, those that swept across the eyelids, for instance, or the genitals. The most fearsome tattoos served to frighten enemies. The men were always at war, valley against valley. Groups of warriors would trudge up over the ridges and descend upon those in the neighboring drainage, looking to capture a suitable sacrifice, a man to be killed in the name of the gods. The great stone terraces that the men built in dark groves above the beach rose to the sculptured stone figures called tikis, large squatting statues with huge empty eyes and scowling mouths. To consecrate the holy place, the bones of victims were hung nearby in the branches of the sacred banyan trees. Sometimes the men practiced ritual cannibalism. The first European to set foot on the Marquesas was Spanish explorer Alvaro de Mendaña, who landed at Hiva in 1595 and named the islands for the Marquesa de Mendoza. In 1813, American naval officer David Porter claimed the islands for the United States. President Madison declined the offer, and France declared the Marquesas a part of its empire in 1842. That year was the same year that Herman Melville sailed into the bay of Taiohae aboard an American whaler. In Tipi, the novel he wrote about Nuku Hiva, Melville described the horseshoe-shaped bay. From the verge of the water, the land rises uniformly on all sides, with green and sloping declivities, until from gently rolling hillsides and moderate elevations it insensibly swells. It insensibly swells into lofty and majestic heights, whose blue outlines ranged all around, close in view. The beautiful aspect of the shore is heightened by deep and romantic glens. As the ferry from the airport enters this bay, the view is precisely as Melville described it, which is to say, awe-inspiring. Taiohae is, arguably, the most spectacular bay in the world. Very often, when lost in admiration at its beauty, Melville wrote, I have experienced a pang of regret that a scene so enchanting should be hidden from the world in these remote seas. The staggering beauty of the bay bursts upon the eye like privilege. Taiohae hasn't changed much since the days of Melville. There are no high-rise hotels, no condos, or planned resorts. There are 3 good reasons for this happy state of affairs. First is the remote nature of the islands. Second, land in the Marquesas is generally owned by family groups that may number in the hundreds. To acquire a legal deed, a developer must obtain the signature of every owner. Then sometimes that means tracking down a cousin who is living in Bakersfield or Borneo or Bimini. Often by the time the last owner signs, one of the first signatories changes his or her mind. The third good reason that there are only 2 small hotels on all of Nuku Hiva is the existence of a nasty little sand gnat called the nono fly. The nono's bite is painless, but over a period of several hours, it raises an ugly red welt that itches like fury. Scratch the welt, and it is likely to burst, bleed, and become infected. The nonos are a plague, and the lack of condos in the paradise of Taiohae is a tribute to the gnat's vicious ubiquity. In the town of Taiohae, I stayed in one of the Keika Hanui Inn's 3 bungalows. The inn is owned by an American couple, Frank and Rose Corser, who taught me how to deal with the nonos. A mixture of 5 parts water to 1 part liquid bleach is splashed on the body in the shower, then rinsed away. The bleach prevents possible infection and also kills the itch for up to 5 hours. While in the Marquesas, I generally bleached myself 3 times a day. My first Sunday in Taiohae, I went to Mass at the Catholic Church. Sitting in the pew, smelling faintly of Clorox, I listened to the bishop speak and recalled the passage in Tipi, in which island maidens swim out to the American whaler and do things with the sailors that Melville felt he dare not mention. The practice of trading sexual favors for such precious items as fish hooks and iron nails was common throughout Polynesia at the time, and the French, through their Catholic missionaries, strove to put an end to the practice. The missionaries believed that the sins of licentiousness and ritual cannibalism were endemic to Marquesan culture, which they therefore systematically set out to destroy. In this they were aided by the French military, and more significantly by the diseases they had brought with them. The population of the islands, which probably stood at 50,000 in the 1700s, fell to under 5,000. There was a brief period of revolt against the French, against the death that had come to the islands aboard the big ships, against the killing of the people and its culture, and in the late 1800s, this pathetic revolution erupted into a period of defiant and orgiastic cannibalism. By the 1900s, the revolt had been crushed and the culture destroyed. Today, the Marquesas are the most staunchly Catholic islands in all of the French Polynesia. After Mass, I talked with Bishop Hervé Marie Leclerc at his home. He was a tall, aristocratic Frenchman who had been in the Marquesas for 14 years. The people here, the bishop said, are as they were in the olden time. Nobody obeys chiefs because no one ever did. If the people work together on a project, they do so because they want to, and not because someone told them to. They are very individualistic. The motto here is mind your own business. The bishop seemed to think that this was a good thing. He was critical of the kind of Catholicism that decimated the culture of the islands a century ago. Even now, he said, the Marquesans are governed by foreigners. They learn a language in school that is not their own. They don't know their ancestors, their legends, their history, their art. What the missionaries had taken from the people, the bishop wanted to give back. I want them to be proud of their heritage, he said. I feel I was sent here to make the people proud to be Marquesans. When a man is proud and happy, when he is content with himself and understands his place in the history of his land, then my job is made easier. He has conquered his confusion, you see, and is then free to accept or reject God as he pleases. Later, the bishop and I visited Damien Haturau, a handsome and imposing man who is probably the best-known sculptor in the Marquesas. The church had commissioned Damien to carve a life-size wooden Madonna in the Marquesan manner. He had worked on the sculpture for 3 weeks, but now he thought there was a fault in the wood, and he told the bishop he wanted to start over. Damien lived above the beach in the Mayo Valley, sometimes called Sculptor's Valley, because so many good wood carvers had chosen to live there. The artist took me into the open-sided shed where he had kept the chisels and the mallets. On the table, recently completed, was an exquisite carving of an elaborately tattooed Marquesan warrior. Beside the sculpture was a scholarly work on the archaeology of the Marquesas that had been written by a German around the turn of the century. Damien was using the sketches in the book to be certain that the tattoos were absolutely authentic. He was, it seemed, in the process of reinventing his own culture using the archaeology of another. The bishop studied Damien's carved warrior for several minutes. Wonderful, he said. Brilliant. Beautiful. Nuku Hiva is an island that bombards the sense, numbing the mind with its constant and unrelenting beauty. The mountains behind Taiohae rise through the groves of coconut and mango. A cruel joke of a road threads through the papaya, banana, and passion fruit trees. Semi-wild goats challenge cars for right-of-way on the road. A sudden squall blows in from the sea, bringing 10 minutes of heavy rain. When the sun breaks through the clouds, light and shadow race across the green slopes below. Descending from the central plateau atop the mountains into the valley called Tai Pivai, our car passed 2 boys carrying a rooster with a long string attached to one leg. If the boys came upon a wild cock in the jungle, they'd set their rooster on it. Both birds would become entangled in the string, and the boys would have themselves another fighting cock. There are wild horses in the jungle as well, horses originally brought to the island by the French. Marquesans use a mare in heat to draw wild stallions, and the horses are easily broken by riding them belly deep through the surf. They are small horses, sturdy climbers, perfectly suited to the steep, jungled slopes of the Marquesas. Everyone, it seems, owns a few stallions. In the village of Tai Pivai, I watched a family of 6 ride up into the hills, followed by 5 riderless horses. In less than 2 hours, they were back, and each of the 5 horses carried over 100 pounds of ripe bananas on its back. Just above Tai Pivai, and near a wide pool in the clear river that runs through the village, there is a small trail that winds a mile or so through the jungle to the largest of the ancient ceremonial sites of the valley. The great stone terrace called Amiae, was perfectly square, 25 by 25 feet. Off to one side was a 100-foot high banyan tree. Aerial roots had dropped down from its branches, and they had in turn become new trunks, so that the tree covered perhaps half an acre. The banyan and the thick groves of coconut trees filtered the sunlight, breaking its power. The sacred site was cool and spectral, shadowed in gloom. A tiki, one of the ancient gods of the valley, squatted before the platform. It was 6 feet high, but 3 times wider than any human being. Blue-green algae grew like leprosy across the idol's immense head and obliterated one of the huge, round, empty eyes. The figure was clearly female, its genitals swollen as if in sensual excitement. It was a simple matter, in the gloom, to imagine sacrifices committed by torchlight, to hear the screams and see the blood flowing over the holy stone. The people of Taipivai, the Tipi, had been the most notorious cannibals of Nuku Hiva, the most feared tribe on the island. There had been skulls hanging from the branches of the second banyan tree. There had been a human sacrifice and ritual cannibalism performed as late as 1900. Later, I sat on a vista point overlooking the valley of Hatihiu and let the afternoon sun bake away the vague, sickly, sad sense of dread that had descended on me at the tiki above Tapivai. Hatihiu was the valley where Robert Louis Stevenson had lived. The gentle beauty of the place suited my mood. The hills, alive with soft, calf-high ferns, spilled down towards the sea in waves of variegated green. The sound of surf rose faintly from the bay below and mingled with the lazy hum of insects, the sigh of the breeze through the trees, the thunder of the waterfalls, and the constant symphony of bird song that was punctuated at odd intervals by a single, strangled, prehistoric croak. Below, a series of jagged black rock spires, too steep to carry vegetation, rose like sentinels above the bay. They might have been the parapets of some alien civilization, or so I thought. And then the idea of blood flowing under the lurid light of torches hit me again, so that the contrast of beauty and terror, of life and death, seemed especially vivid. The tiki had been female, but perhaps the swollen organs were not meant to indicate sexual excitement. Perhaps the god that stood over the place was in the process of giving birth. On the island Hivaoa, I stayed for a time in Puamau, a village of some 200 souls, as is the case almost everywhere in the Marquesas. There is no commercial hotel in the village. A visitor simply asks to see the mayor, who makes it his business to provide shelter. The mayor of Puamau decided that I could stay in his village, and I was given a comfortable room in his own house, a poured concrete dwelling, with a working toilet and shower. Meals were provided along with the room for a cost of about $30 a day. I ate well on roast pork, passion fruit, platters of raw tuna fillets, marinated in coconut milk and lime, and French bread that was baked daily in a wood-fired oven. I had come to Puamau to watch the single most important event in the economic life of the village. The copra schooner was about to make its monthly visit. Copra is dried coconut meat. The islanders collect coconuts, husk them, and leave the meat to dry in large wooden beds. The dried meat is stuffed into burlap sacks and taken to the beach for loading. The copra is transported by ship to a factory in Tahiti, where the meat is cleaned and crushed. The coconut oil is used in soap, shampoo, synthetic rubber, glycerin, hydraulic brake fluid, margarine, and vegetable shortening. Copra is a single source of income for most Marquesans, and the arrival of the copra schooner is cause for celebration. People who live up in the hills bring down strings of horses loaded with copra. Everyone gathers on the beach as the boat steams into Puamau Bay. Women play a kind of bingo that may only otherwise be played on Sundays. Young boys strum guitars and sing. Children play in the surf. The able-bodied men hoist 150-pound sacks of copra onto their shoulders and trudge out through the pounding surf to the schooner's whaleboat, a 20-foot-long craft designed to carry heavy loads through the breakers and out to the anchored ship. The schooner is Puamau's link to the outside world. When the whaleboat returns from the schooner, it is full of consumer goods ordered by villagers and paid for with the 30 cents per pound they earn for their copra. I saw the men offload a few stoves, a refrigerator, and some furniture, but for the most part, the copra schooner delivered stereo systems, dirt bikes, motorcycles, and televisions. In the 2 days it took to load and unload the schooner, I saw at least half a dozen Sonys and as many VCRs invade Puamau. The French Polynesian government installed television transmitters in Taiohae and Atuona in 1979. Relay stations on the mountaintops beam the signal down to smaller villages like Puamau. The programs are recorded in Tahiti and broadcast, commercial-free, for 2 hours a day. In Puamau, at the mayor's home, I saw a towering inferno, an episode of Shogun, and some kung fu epic out of Hong Kong. A French official, who would rather not be quoted, told me that the government provides television because the people love it. They love it so much, according to this man, that many of them might move to Tahiti simply to watch Dallas once a week. In Tahiti, however, jobs are scarce, and there is a growing problem of overpopulation. The idea is, the official said, that if Marquesans have TV at home, we won't have to provide food and homes for them in Tahiti. The fact that television exists in so remote a land, in a place littered with the artifacts of the old times and the old beliefs, sometimes staggers the imagination and presents the traveler with a number of truly remarkable culture cross-currents. The day after the copra boat left, for instance, the mayor led me on a short walk through the jungle to a tiki that stood above his house. There are more than 25 tikis in the Puamau Valley, but this one was 8 feet high, the largest tiki in all of French Polynesia. Above the ceremonial site, there was a steep rocky spire that rose to a needle-like summit. We began climbing the spire, the mayor and I, using the rope he'd brought along. After a stiff hour's climb, we reached the summit. The mayor moved down a few feet among the ironwood trees and reached into a small cave about 2 feet in diameter. He pulled out a human skull and began telling a long, incredibly involved story about how a man, or more properly, a man's head, came to be buried there. It seems that some time ago, I later placed the date at about 1900. There was a queen in Puamau who lived in a house, on the large stone terrace not far from the mayor's house. In this time, said the mayor, a prolonged drought threatened the staple breadfruit crop, and there was a danger of famine. The queen requested a human sacrifice to appease the gods, and 3 men took it upon themselves to perform this duty. They pulled all the hair out of their heads and hung their machetes around their necks, which was a dead giveaway to everyone else in the village that they were looking for someone expendable. The people of Puamau gathered together on the beach for mutual safety. The 3 hairless men were forced to find a victim in another drainage. It was over there, the mayor said, pointing to a small ridge, where they saw a man in a coconut tree. The story became very detailed here. The mayor wanted me to know precisely how many shots were fired. 3. 3. I can count. 3. How many times the man was hit? Twice. And which was the fatal shot, the one that passed through the right kidney? The dead man's head and long bones were carried to the top of the spire, where they were placed in a cave. The rains came immediately, of course, and Puamau was saved. The French heard about the murder, however, and sent a gunboat to Puamau Bay. The queen was imprisoned on the ship until the village surrendered the killers. The 3 men were taken out to the ship at gunpoint and were never seen again. The queen was released. The mayor pointed down to a house in Puamau and said the name of the family that lived there. That is the man's family, he said, holding up the skull. The mayor stared into the empty eye sockets, in the manner of a man who is mentally adding a set of figures. This is the great-grandfather, he said at last. And the family knows he is up there? I asked. Yes, of course. And they don't want to get this skull and bury it properly? No, the mayor said. He seemed to regard the question as both strange and mildly offensive. Why would they? It was late in the afternoon. The mayor's story had taken almost 2 hours to tell. He carefully placed the skull back in the cave and said we would have to hurry back down to the house. The television would be coming on soon, and he wanted to watch Dynasty. I am living in Aotona, in a bungalow near the black sand beach where Gauguin painted many of his most famous oils. The bungalow stands on the site of Gauguin's house. In recent years, the place sometimes has been the home of travelers whose reconfirmations were not recorded. Perhaps these hapless visitors reacted as I did. Perhaps they spend a day or two trying to figure out how to change their schedule or contact the people they were supposed to meet at home. Over the space of days, perhaps others also felt the sun burn away their anger, and maybe they settled into the gentle rhythm of life in the Marquesas. These days, I rise at 6 o'clock, just as the 5 or 6 roosters who seem to live under my window explode in paroxysms of ear-shattering bravado. The old man who lives next door is generally up already, sitting on his porch and playing taped Tahitian laments on his immense JVC boombox. I pull my shorts on and step out onto my own porch. The old man and I nod to each other, but he expects me to ignore him for the rest of the day, just as I expect him to ignore me. Mind your own business, as the bishop said, is the motto here. About 7:30, I walk 5 blocks to the bakery and buy a loaf of good French bread fresh from the oven. I keep forgetting to bring money, but the woman behind the counter recognizes me and runs a tab under the name of M. American. The dog that has adopted me follows at my heels. He strolled into the bungalow several days ago, and I shouted one of the few phrases I know in Marquesan, Kir-a. The words generally addressed to invading dogs, chickens, horses, or pigs means get out. I had the misfortune of running into a dog who thought his name was Kir-a. He gave me one of the most open-mouthed looks of keen canine anticipation, the kind that seems to say, "Oh boy, want to play? Got something for me to eat?" So Kir-a lives on my porch. He sleeps at my feet while I type and tips over the garbage whenever he thinks I'm not looking. About 11:30, when it gets too hot to work, I walk down to the Gauguin beach for a swim. I am trying to improve my French with the aid of a French-English dictionary and a French comic book. I found out about the American cowboy, Stormy Joe, and his comical sidekick, Sardine. Already I have learned to say, "Drop your gun or I'll kill you like a mad dog." Kir-a lives in the sand while I read. Kir-a lies in the sand while I read. After an hour or so, he gets up and slinks off down the beach, looking back over his shoulder in the most guilty fashion imaginable. "It's not what you think," he says. "I'm not really sneaking back to the bungalow to tip over your garbage." About 2:30, I walk back home and clean up the garbage. Kir-a, skulking under the picnic table on my porch, eyes me cautiously. I step into the bungalow, bleach myself down, take a cold shower, and lie down for a brief nap. Outside my window, chickens are lunching on some ants that are feeding on spilled garbage. I find the pluck and cluck of contented poultry curiously soothing. Some days I borrow a stallion from the lady who lives nearby and ride over the ridge to a bay called Ta'aoa, where there is a beach that seems devoid of no-nos. There is something almost unbearably romantic about riding alone, galloping bareback across the sand as the breakers thunder into the shore. Some evenings I go to a Chinese family's home on a hill above Atuona's 100 lights. The family runs an informal restaurant. I'm particularly fond of the river shrimp dinner. Strangely, I've stopped my habit of visiting the airline office and reconfirming my flight every day. I think I'm becoming almost Marquesan in my attitude. If I'm on the next plane out, fine. If not, what the hell? My work is going well. The food is good. The land is vibrant. I'm content, and my dog loves me for no very good reason. Money is no problem. There is plenty to eat growing on the hills above town, if it should come to that. Worrying about something I can't control, something like another missed flight, would simply spoil an otherwise perfect day. I love that story. I haven't read it in years. I could do one more. How are you guys doing? Did you enjoy that one? Great story. This book, really, if you can read it, it's really it's It's a good one. Let's see. The next section is called Wet Work. That's kind of intriguing. Um, there's one called Harem Fantasy. Vertigo turns an old dream upside down. There's also Drunk Driving for Poison Sea Snakes. There's also Fear of Frying, like FRY, like deep frying. Um, I don't know. What are we feeling? Maybe I'll just read the first one. It's only 3 pages. Let me see. I'll see how I'm going. An ecology of secrets. Being a consideration of the real laws of the jungle, complete with diamonds, madmen, and gold. Okay, let's read this one. It's short. If I can get the light right. Okay. There we go. There is something a bit humid about the picture. Something moist and mysterious. Let's see, I'll turn this a little bit. Okay. Something moist and mysterious, something vaguely erotic and tangled and malarial. It is a picture taken somewhere in a South American jungle. A white woman, naked, but for what appears to be a pair of pantyhose, and 3 male Indians decked out in Stone Age regalia. I found it quite by accident about 5 years ago while poring over the files at the South American Explorers Club in Lima, Peru. It fell out from between 2 folders. No one at the club knew where it had come from or what it meant, and I guess you might say I sort of stole it. In the years since then, I've traveled regularly to various Central and South American jungles. They scare me, these jungles. I find them dark and mythic, and I keep returning to them in the way that one returns to a disturbing nightmare. They are finally inexplicable in their chaos, but there is some meaning in that, just as there is meaning in the picture. Gold and diamonds draw men of varying degrees of desperation into the jungles of South America. Some of these men, old-timers for the most part, can be found in and around Canaima, formerly the exclusive haunt of adventurers, bush pilots, prospectors, and explorers. Canaima is these days a modern resort. Set deep in a Venezuelan jungle known as the Lost World, Canaima is only a day or two's journey by outboard-powered dugout from Angel Falls, at the base of Auyan Tepui, the Devil Mountain. The resort itself is situated on an immense lagoon formed by the Rio Carao and fringed by soft pink sand. Everywhere there are orchids, and the fecund, slightly sweet odor of the jungle is amiable and caressing. At its deepest, the lagoon is black, somehow metallic, and great clouds float across it in reflection. Where it's shallow, the water is clear and clean and brown, the color of strong tea or good bourbon. Such dark jungle rivers and lagoons carry organic acids and do not provide a good place for insects to breed. Piranha are seldom found, since they tend to live in slow, swollen, sediment-rich rivers, such as the Orinoco, whose surface is the color of lead. I have seen men fishing for piranha on the Orinoco banks, fishing for the sheer joy of killing. They would pull the piranha in and let them flop to death on the bank. The little fish looked like vampire sun perch. But there are no piranha or insects at Canaima, and the tourists, especially the well-to-do Venezuelans, tend to wear those abbreviated swimsuits associated with the Rio de Janeiro. For many North Americans, Canaima is a first taste of the jungle, and in the bar overlooking the lagoon, they may meet some of the old-timers, and this is where the trouble sometimes starts. Legitimate businessmen in Canaima complain that it is almost impossible to get wealthy tourists to invest in aviation services or other necessary concessions. Instead, people want to drop their money into unlikely gold and diamond mining ventures. And the tale is told of a bush pilot I'll call Norman. Norman shouldn't have been anywhere in Venezuela. His visa had been revoked over some serious financial misunderstandings, but he was in Canaima when 2 brothers from Houston arrived. Somehow, probably over drinks at the Lagoon Bar, Norman discovered that these two big, good-hearted old boys owned a machine shop in Houston, and they were doing very well. Norman decided to tell them about the diamonds. The stones were there for the taking, buried in the coarse, sandy banks of a river that flowed along the flat-top Ayuyang Tepui. Norman had bought the diamonds from a drunken miner near the Luepa army base. They were poor stones, small, discolored, virtually worthless. Norman salted the sands with them on the Devil Mountain, and when he flew the brothers up there and showed them where to dig, each came up with a couple of the little dark stones. The brothers went back to Houston, borrowed all they could on the machine shop, and sent Norman $25,000 to get started on their newly acquired diamond mine. Norman took the money and flew off in the general direction of Brazil. Now in this area of Venezuela, isolated landing strips are everywhere, and many of them are uncharted except by those who conduct extra-legal business. Norman had hired a couple of men to stock one of the strips with drums of fuel. Unfortunately for Norman, he hadn't been paying his bills, and when he put down on the rutted red dirt strip in the middle of the jungle, he discovered there was no fuel. Because of his visa difficulties, he couldn't land anywhere where fuel was legitimately sold, and so he decided to try for Brazil on what he had left in his tank. It is a ticklish manner, crash landing on a light plane in the jungle. You want to glide down as slowly as possible. You want to snag your plane in one of the trees that rise like monstrous stalks of broccoli above the lesser vegetation. These trees can be more than 150 feet high, and most bush pilots carry a rope for the final descent. Norman ran out of fuel near Santa Elena, a town about 12 miles short of the Brazilian border, and he was taken into custody. Meanwhile, the brothers were back in Canaima, asking around about Norman, and they didn't seem so good-hearted anymore, just big and determined. That's the end of our story. As the old-timers tell it, no one saw the brothers again. Several years later, Norman showed up in Canaima. The old-timers couldn't help but notice that he had no fingers on his right hand. They were all gone, cut off neat and clean, just as if the job had been done in a machine shop. Let's see. I guess there's 10 more pages to this story. Someone asked, what's the name of the novel? The novel is A Wolverine is Eating My Leg by Tim Cahill. It's a collection of short stories by an investigative journalist who got himself into a bunch of crazy situations. I'm going to continue this one. Most stories involving precious stones in jungles end poorly. The Muso mine, about 100 miles north of Bogota, Colombia, is the source of 80% of the emeralds sold on the world market. Bulldozers strip the hillsides while about 20,000 prospectors wade through the river below, panning for emeralds loosened by the machines above. The prospectors are not allowed to move above the riverbanks, and armed guards on the hillside frequent them if they do. After years of gangland slayings in the jungle, the Colombian government has rented the mine to the Heavy Gang, which won control of the mine from the Goose Gang. After at least one massacre and uncounted assassinations, the government's lucrative decision to cooperate with the gangsters has eliminated much of the violence associated with Muso. Officials recently told Warren Hoge of the New York Times that the mine has been pacified, but Hoge quoted an outside observer who said that he had counted 24 corpses in 21 days at Muso. The observer said that some prospectors had taken to swallowing their emeralds when confronted by thieves, and some thieves had taken to disemboweling their victims. Two of the most popular bars in the area are called the Seven Knife Stabs, and where life is worth nothing. The law of the jungle seems to be this: there is no law in the jungle. Which isn't to suggest that there aren't a lot of policemen and soldiers around. There are, and one reason for this is that boundaries are difficult to establish. There are border disputes everywhere: Peru and Ecuador, Belize and Guatemala, Guyana and Venezuela. The less populated an area becomes, and the deeper into the jungle one goes, the more forms there are to fill out and checkpoints to go through. One may be obliged to show a passport, a visa, or permits to state age, marital status, occupation, reason for being in the area, to explain one's very existence. In certain areas of Peru, one may have to first report to the Peruvian Investigative Police, or PIP, before checking into a hotel. Miguel Zamora, the man who heads up PIP in the northeastern town of Chachapoyas, did not seem to trust three of us. The expedition had been launched in search of a pre-Incan culture known as the Chachas. We were also making our own maps, and these, Zamora decided, might be of assistance to, say, an Ecuadorian military expedition. Every other day that we were in town, Zamora called us in for another little talk. On the other hand, the chief of police, the commandant, seemed to like and trust us. He had sent his daughter to a school in Lima, where she studied English, and she had taught him an American song. Hingale bales, hingale bales. We figured it out more from the tune than the words. And so, on a hot July afternoon in Chachapoyas, which is located in the eastern foothills of the Andes, on a plateau that drops off into 3,000 miles of jungle, we joined in with the commandant. Jingle all the way, oh what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Every time we saw the commandant, he reminded us of the fun we had singing Hingale Bales together. He wore a hat something like an American policeman's, except it was 3 times as high and had gold braids on it. It looked like a hat that a loony dictator would wear in a slapstick film. The commandant learned more about our reasons for being in the Chachapoyas in 1 hour than Zamora did in the half-dozen chats he had with us. As it turned out, we found a number of forts and stone cities of the Chachas. They were set deep in the forest in a mountainous region known as the Seja de Selva, or eyebrow of the jungle. We had used a 16th century Spanish text as a guide, and the cities were as described in the royal commentaries of the Incas. We camped for days in some of those vegetation-choked ruins and tried to imagine the lives of a people long gone. I suspect these should have been humbling days, but an intense euphoria overwhelmed all other emotions. It was as if the jungle had drawn its breath and sucked these people back into its darkness. There were ceramic artifacts, 1,000 years old and more, and the potsherds sometimes lay in community with the human remains. We left this evidence for the archaeologists and marveled at the power of the forest. It had sent roots snaking through the interstices of the great stone forts and had swallowed the culture whole. Standing in the ruins, I imagined uncontrolled natural forces at work. It was like walking through the rubble of a hurricane-ravaged shoreline. The ruins had taken on the syrupy odor of all that triumphant vegetation. I was standing on the scene of some slow, choking horror. And I was alive. I would survive. And these thoughts left me feeling blessed and giddy. I sat next to an investment counselor on a recent flight from Miami to a jungle island off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula. I told him about the picture, the white woman in pantyhose, and the 3 impassive Indians, and what it meant to me. We worked our way around that meaning, just as I am doing here. By swapping jungle tales, the man told me this story. I have a friend who is a very successful contractor, and his wife is what you might call an adventurer. She's a pilot, and has been all over the world. Well, she heard about some gold mines up one of the rivers of Brazil, and wanted me to see if I could find investors. It looked a little too iffy for me, so she went ahead and raised the money on her own. She got all the permits and certifications that you need and hired 2 Vietnam vets to help her work the site. One day, a government plane set down on their landing strip, and they were arrested. The charge was murder, multiple counts. It seemed there was another operation in progress in the area. The guy who headed the thing was hiring criminals, escaped convicts, and various other unsavory types who might feel comfortable in the jungle, away from any legal agencies. These fellows would work a site, and each of them, I suppose, had a percentage of the take. The fellow who was running the operation would fly to the site with a couple of thugs and shoot the miners, take the gold, and save the percentage. This must have gone on for quite some time. Few of the dread men had family or friends who would worry about them or even know where they were. Anyway, the Brazilian government finally caught on to their operation. My friend was charged in connection with 78 murders. She and her 2 vets were tossed in jail in Manaus, along with 7 other men. One man, who wore a 2-pound gold medallion around his neck, got bail the next day. It turned out he was running The mining and murder operation. My friend was left in a cell with 6 thugs. She slept against the wall. One of the vets slept beside her while the others kept watch. The other 6 never made a move. Well, you can imagine the field day the Brazilian press had with the case. They found out that my friend had a small canister of mace in an oversized belt buckle. One headline went something like, American aviatrix, alleged mass murderess in possession of deadly nerve gas. After 3 weeks, it became apparent that she could not have committed those murders, and she was released. Did they ever catch the guy with the medallion? I asked. I don't know. My friend still has all the permits, and she's going back. She's going back? Gold's up over $600 an ounce again. Some poor guy was sobbing in the next room, and I was just coming off another case of dysentery, swigging paregoric and thinking about that damned picture again. The picture and the jungle. The hotel was located just outside Flores, a town in the northeastern Guatemalan state of El Petén. It was a civilized sort of place, with clean beds, running water, and flush toilets. But it was in the jungle, after all, and the elements had conspired to sabotage the hotel's pretensions. Several months before, the hotel had been situated on the shore of Lake Pitan Itza. Now it was in the lake Pitan Itza. The lake had been mysteriously rising for more than a year, and the steady, unseasonable rains of the past few weeks had been disastrous. The swimming pool in what had been the courtyard was underwater, and a foot or more of Lake Pitan Itza lapped up against the building. Flocks of tropical water birds floated by the windows, glanced inside, and blurted out horrid little croaks. The ceiling of my room was wire mesh. 10 feet above, that was sloping, thatched roof. Air circulated nicely, but you could hear people in other rooms as if they were standing next to you, and a man in the adjacent room seemed to be lifting weights. There was the sound of heavy exertion. Buh, buh, followed by several quick breaths. Whee, hoo, whee, hoo. A young American woman was speaking to the man. So they're ruined. A pair of jogging shoes. Big deal. $30. Geez. Please, Larry, don't do this to yourself. We can get the camera reconditioned. Geez. We have 8 more days, and it just can't keep raining like this, really. Clearly, Larry was not lifting weights. He was suffering a common sort of allergic reaction to jungle travel. Larry, the woman said. No, you just stop it. I think the Mayan ruins are beautiful, even in the rain. So it got a little muddy, and there were a few mosquitoes, and we had some bad luck. So what, Larry? You're 32 years old. Will you please stop crying? I had just spent a couple of weeks at the more remote ruins, stumbling around in some rain and mud. All archaeological evidence suggests that the Mayans, in what we now think of as the classic period, were the most advanced people of pre-Columbian America. They developed accurate calendars and hieroglyphic writing. About 900 AD, the race fell into an inexplicable decline. There are any number of theories about what happened: famine, flood, disease, revolt, invasion. My own idea is patently incorrect and stubbornly wrong-headed, but I cling to it because it terrifies me. I like to think that the jungle simply swallowed up the culture. El Pitan has not always been heavily forested. Analysis of wind-blown pollen that has recovered from a long core drilled into the bottom of centrally located lake shows that in about 2000 BC, El Pitan was a land of broad savannas. The dominance of jungle over grassland began early in the Classic period. Archaeologists believe that in the post-Classic period, a poorer sort of folk moved into the temples and lived there until the jungle engulfed the buildings. Perhaps, as the jungle advanced, they prayed to the carved stone images of their ancestors. It was clearing up when we came in, the woman in the next room said. We waded in, Larry moaned. There's probably a beautiful sunset going on right now. I heard the sound of drapes being opened, and I looked out my own window. Rain was falling in sheets. It was the same leaden color as the lake. A huge waterfowl drifted by, and directly under my neighbor's window it said, "Gawak!" There was a silence in the room. Then Larry began lifting his weights again, much faster this time. Joseph Conrad, in his brilliant evocations of the jungles of Africa and the Far East, used and perhaps overused the word impenetrable. In truth, those jungles and the lowland jungles of Central and South America only seem impenetrable from a road or river or trail or clearing. In those places where sunlight is allowed to reach the ground, a tangled wall erupts out of the earth, a dense green wall that protects the jungle from civilization and can easily be seen as a warning. In the forest proper, under the endless broad-leaved canopy, direct rays of the sun seldom reach the earth. What light there is seems tired, heavy, turgid, a flaccid twilight. The floor between the tree trunks is largely bare, but the jungle supports an abundance of life. The majority of invertebrate organisms in the Amazon basin have yet to be named, and the generation's worth of botanical research has yet to be done. Above, arboreal frogs with adhesive pads on their feet creep over the dripping leaves. Hordes of bats pollinate the colorful flowers sprouting on tree trunks rather than attempting the tangle of greenery. Aquatic flatworms live in the perpetual moistness of the forest floor. There are tapirs and jaguars, spider and howler monkeys, amphibians, ants, and ants eaters. There are spiders that drop from the canopy above and eat birds, and there are more birds in the jungle than anywhere on earth. In the jungle rivers, 100-pound rodents graze on the reeds, and anacondas, those 20 to 30 feet long green and white snakes, lie in wait for pigs and small deer that they will kill by constriction and eat whole. The jungle generates persistent reports of 40-foot anacondas, and one miner swears he's seen such a reptile sunning itself on a riverbank, with the antlers of a deer protruding from its open mouth. The snake was going to have to wait for the head to decompose before it could spit out those horns, the miner told me. Despite the telling and retelling of such tales, despite the abundance of animal life, the shrieks and barks and howls one hears, it is the forest itself that captures the mind and sometimes ensnares the soul. Contact with pure, unmitigated savagery, Conrad wrote, with primitive nature and primitive man brings sudden and profound trouble into the heart. For Conrad, civilization was not a matter of flush toilets and paved roads. In his jungle tales, good men left in the isolation of the forest became slave traders, murderers, less than men. The jungle provides a suggestion of things vague, uncontrollable, and repulsive, whose discomposing intrusion excites the imagination and tries the civilized nerves of the foolish and the wise alike. I have felt these sensations and have translated them as fear. Especially when lost in that troubling darkness, I have felt the sheer weight of indifferent animosity, of some vast, humid hatred. In the jungle, a lost man feels driven by a desire to plunge ahead, while the hanging vines slap at his face and roots rise up to tangle his feet. Better to stop, sit, think. And that is when the green hostility begins to smother the soul. The mind's eye sees the forest as if it were a time-lapse film. Trees twist into grotesque shapes, the better to steal the sun. Parasites erupt out of healthy organisms. Creepers lash out to strangle lesser plants. Lianas, long woody vines, drop from the branches like thick ropes and root at the base of the host tree, choking off its life so that they themselves stand as a new tree with the dead one inside. The jungle is moist and warm. Living things may grow and reproduce all year long. Competition comes not from the elements, but from the volume of life. A lost man, sitting, thinking, perceives that every living thing longs for the death of every other living thing. He understands the ever-ready suspicion of evil. Conrad wrote about the placid and impenetrable mass of an unjustifiable violence. These thoughts took on a special clarity when, in the company of other reporters, I visited the necropolis of Jonestown, where the stench of decomposing bodies sent bile rising into my throat. I had already spent days talking with survivors, and I knew that Jim Jones had been deluded, probably addicted to drugs, and clinically paranoid even before he moved to the jungle. But the jungle tore at his mind and fed his paranoia. When the rains came early and the crops failed, it was because the CIA had seeded the clouds. In the jungle compound, from the wooden chair He called his throne. Jones passed on his paranoia to the people of Jonestown, for paranoia is a contagious disease. They saw soldiers in the bush beyond the clearing, and they could hear the growling of vehicles as these shadow forces massed for attack. It was a debilitating siege, and in the end, like the heroes of Masada, who killed themselves nearly 2 millenniums ago rather than surrender to the Romans, most of them committed suicide rather than submit to the shadow forces that lay in wait out there in the jungle. I'm not suggesting that the tragedy happened because Jonestown lay in the jungle. Still, it is impossible to conceive of a similar occurrence in Indianapolis or San Francisco. The madness, the dance macabre of suicide and murder could have happened no place else but in the dark vastness of the jungle. I have sat around fires with people others might describe as primitive, even savage. We have shared food. And oh, my light died. Let me grab my other light. Come on, light. Okay, there we go. Alright. Oh, that's weird. Let me put it the other way. Okay. I've sat around fires with people others might describe as primitive, even savage. We have shared food, and I have been places where there is no evidence that man exists. I find an inexplicable delight in that, in the sure knowledge that, throughout all of time, no other human being has stood on the same spot. It is finally a fragile emotion, something not easily recollected in more temperate climes, where man has stripped the earth of darkness. Still, I find a flicker of that lustrous delight, of lunacy in darkness, in the idea of a white woman in pantyhose posing before 3 unimpressed Indians. Stare at the picture long enough, knowing that it is a story that will never be told, and you realize that the jungle is an ecology of secrets, that in the jungle, more than any other place on earth, there is the conservation of mystery. The white woman sits in her pantyhose, and the welts on her back tell us the jungle is eating her alive, long after she is gone, after she has screamed her last curse at the photographer and the whole idiotic project, whatever it may have been. One feels the Indians will still be there, sturdy and placid, and that is the final meaning of the picture. As civilization schemes to violate the jungle conspires to brutalize civilization. For those of us who are just joining, that was a short story from the book A Wolverine is Eating My Leg. This was a short story called An Ecology of Secrets. Being a consideration of the real laws of the jungle, complete with diamonds, madmen, and gold. I think I'm done reading. I want to check in with you guys. What do you think of that story? Do I have a belly button piercing? I do not. My belly button is weird. It's a weird shape. It's neither an innie nor an outie. And as a result, I will probably never get it pierced. I've only met like one other person that has a belly button that looks like mine. It's like an innie outie. And my mom told me that when they cut my umbilical cord when I was born, she had like kind of a hippie doctor that like decided to like do something different with how she cut it off. So it's like, here, let me see. I'm gonna stand up. I'll show you. This is all you're gonna get. Like, you know, I'm never gonna willingly show you my feet, but you can see my weird belly button. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, it's like half. It's like a. I don't know, man. I don't know. Screenshot my belly button. It's not that exciting, is it? I don't know. So yeah, that's my weird belly button. Is anyone else watching? Do you have a belly button like that? I don't know. It's probably not that weird. I'm sure other people have it. I've just only met like one person. Benjamin says I'm no weirdo. So do you have an innie or let's take a poll. Do you have an innie or an outie? Who has an innie? Who has an outie? To me, innies are kind of weird. Like I know everybody has them, but it's like this like deep gaping hole that goes nowhere. Like does the hole ever stop? Is it a portal to another dimension? Like to me, an innie is like that's a wormhole to another dimension. You can't see the bottom of it. Like lint gets stuck in there. Okay, you can't convince me that innies aren't weird. Okay, what should I do? Looks like a lot of people got innies. Why are we spamming bread? Like, what's the deal with bread? Breadfruit? Bread. 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 What are we talking about? Why are we talking about bread? I've been going to the beach to play guitar this week, and okay, do you ever go? Okay, this is me being really dorky, but I love when you go to a grocery store and they have like a ton of stuff that's like manager special, like marked down. And so the grocery store right by the beach that I go to, they always have huge piles of bread that are like 70% off. And that's like one of my favorite things in life is like getting a loaf of bread for like $1.28. Is that weird? I don't know. I'm sure everybody loves that. They had this, I do need chapstick. You're right. Okay, I'm gonna get it. It's like the first time today someone reminded me to get chapstick. Thank you for being a friend. Thank you for being a friend. Oh no, Bethresin has a gluten allergy. That is so sad. Bread is like my nemesis. Bread is like delicious, but it doesn't make me feel great. Like, have you ever eaten a bunch of bread and then you stand up and you feel like you're about to pass out? Just like all the blood drains out of your head and then your vision goes black and you're like about to like get the vapors and faint like a sickly Victorian woman. Does that ever happen to you? Just me? Okay, I'm just crazy. That happens to me sometimes. Let's see. What do I got? I got this pumpkin pie chapstick that oh god, it's terrible. Like, do you guys enjoy pumpkin spice latte? Because, like, this tastes like bargain bin pumpkin spice latte. But it's chapstick, so I'm gonna use it. Okay. So, like, one of the things I enjoy doing is like going to discount stores because like sometimes you find really weird stuff there and I'm like a pack rat, like I can't resist trying something weird. So like one time I was at this discount store, right? And like they have weird stuff. Like one time I got like they had like the 7-Eleven industrial size like coffee mix jug. So I bought it because I'm just weird like that. Like I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna get this iced coffee mix and then I'll have like a month's worth of iced coffee for like $1. So there's this one time I found like an industrial sized jug of pumpkin spice latte mix. And the basic bitch that I am, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna get that. It's $3. Like I could have PSL for like a year. So like I get this pumpkin spice latte mix and like I don't know what it was. Maybe it was too concentrated or I used too much, but it was like so disgusting. Like it was the Starbucks mix, but like I clearly did not know how to wield such power. Like I didn't understand, like I'm not a bar, I've never been a Starbucks barista and I know that Starbucks is evil and I shouldn't have even tried. But for some reason, like it just tasted like pumpkin spice, like gasoline fumes when I tried to put it in my coffee. I didn't finish it. I had this massive like gallon jug of PSL syrup that never got used. Crazy. Why did I do that? I don't know. The rat brain tells me to do things. It sees sugar, it buys it. Why? I don't know. It did. I swear to God, it tasted like pumpkin gasoline fumes. It was like 10 times concentrated. I probably just needed a squirt, like one squirt. What did I do? I put a whole glog in my coffee. Not smart. I shouldn't have done it. I don't know. You clearly can't beat the system when it's Starbucks. They keep their witchcraft like highly secretive. You can only know the ways if you've read and studied the Starbucks grimoire, if you know what you're doing. And I do not. I clearly can only weld like basic sugar to matcha powder. I should not go near concentrated Starbucks gasoline fluid. It's not for me to know. That will remain a mystery of the universe. All bread, only bread, croissants. I don't know, I'm kind of enjoying the bread. I don't want to time them out. Thank you for joining me. This has been an interesting evening. I'm grateful to have you all. Just kind of monologuing, like the stupid thoughts in my head. Um, you can help me understand. All bread. Everybody's a fan of bread. I think my favorite bread is always going to be jalapeno cheese bread because it always ends up discounted and it's like spicier than your regular bread. I don't know, a croissant is pretty good though. I don't have a story about bread. Story about bread? Could I think up a story about bread? Did I ever make bread? I've made bread before. Did you ever have a bread machine as a child? My grandma did. We used it like twice before we got bored of it. It ended up like not being worth the time to like make it, and we were bad at slicing it. So we ended up with these massive thick slices of bread. Bread queen. I'm not the bread queen. Oh, okay. I once had a neighbor. She was Mormon, so she like made everything from scratch. She had the most gnarly sourdough starter. She made the most incredible chocolate chip banana bread I've ever tasted in my life out of sourdough starter. It was incredible. That's probably the best bread story I ever had. I miss her. I miss her so much. And her banana bread. But she's out there kicking ass somewhere. Nutella? What about a Rising Storm? What about Nutella? If you want bread, like, go find a sourdough starter and bring that good bread into the world. God, she even made sourdough based pancakes, like anything. You can make it with a sourdough base and it'll be healthier. It's more probiotic. That's all I got. But I'm too lazy to make a sourdough starter. One time I made biscuits from scratch. That's pretty delicious. I don't know. We're talking about bread. Pedro asked, why are we talking about bread? Everybody is commenting bread. So now I'm just word vomiting everything I can remember about bread. I'm can't believe you guys are even listening to me. Um, that's all I got, you guys. I don't have anything else interesting. Something else weird that's happened. Uh, oh my God, are we in a parasocial relationship now? That's like, things are getting pretty serious, you guys. I love you guys too. Thank you for being here. Oh my God. What else? I do have, this is kind of shameless. I do have macaroni and cheese in the fridge. I could eat. I haven't eaten dinner yet. You are my army. Okay, would you wait 5 minutes for me to go get food? And then I can come back and eat food. Okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm not gonna ask. I'm just gonna do it. Go get your dinner and eat with me if you haven't eaten. Or go get your decadent midnight snack. Oh, it's useless. Okay, I'm leaving you like that. I'm sorry. Okay, how many of you have I lost? Oh no, I lost half. I lost half. There's only 30 left. Ugh. Ugh. Okay, you guys are back. 47. Okay. Not gone forever. Okay, so we've got mac and cheese. We're being shameless. I can't be queen bread. I'm almost out of bread. There's not much bread left in my fridge. I lie. I picked up a giant ube ensamada. Do you know what those are? Okay. There's a Filipino bakery near my house. And I was out like running an errand one morning. And I was like looking for coffee. So I went into McDonald's. Like for some reason I thought McDonald's had like 99-cent coffee. They probably did at one point, but they don't anymore. Anyway, so I did not find 99-cent coffee. I found like basically their coffee is as expensive as Starbucks, whatever. Anyway, so across the street were some Filipino markets and I found a $1 coffee at the Filipino market. right next to the Filipino market was a Filipino bakery called Valerio's. And they have what's called ube ensamada. And it's giant. It's like the size of a small pizza. And it was $4.50. And it's like this fluffy bread, like with ribbons of this purple yam inside of it. Bread, you know. And then they basically slather like butter, like it's like a buttercream kind of. It's like margarine and sugar on top. And it's so good. And I have one, so maybe when I'm done with this, I'll go cut a piece and show you guys because it's like one of my favorite things. It's so cheap. It's so cheap. It's $4.50 for this giant thing. It's basically like um you know, like those raspberry cream cheese danishes? If you swapped yam with the raspberry, it's kind of like that. Purple yam. So if you like taro or it's ube. It's kind of like taro. It's a little different. So I like cooking. I do not. I do not enjoy cooking, but for the live stream, I will do it. I don't like cooking, but I like eating. One with all says, I'm excited for acorn squash season. I grew a couple acorn squash once. I used to have a garden and I would like compost everything. So I threw all my squash seeds, and squash are like easy. Um, so I grew a couple acorn squash and then we put them in like a stew. It was awesome. What am I eating? Um, so I made macaroni and cheese. I basically made it's a mix of stuff I got from the food pantry at school when I was taking a guitar class. So it's just like green beans, corn, mac and cheese, and tuna. It's like a tuna casserole. It's terrible. But I mean, you know, mac and cheese is like always satisfying. Almost green bean casserole. It is kind of like that. You think I'm interesting? You clearly haven't hung out with me long enough. It could be very boring. I can also be very delirious. If I get tired enough, I get pretty weird. Acorn squash. Acorn squash are like, it looks like, yeah, it kind of looks like an acorn about that big. It's dark green and it's got like ribs or ridges. Let me see if I can pull up a picture. Let me see. Ugh, juggling. Let's see. Ah, you ain't hungry, so that's a blessing. Exactly, Mona. I have food. I have that to be grateful for. So, like, I'm not complaining. I've definitely had days where I was starving. Okay. There have definitely been days where, like, it's like you know, where you're starving, you don't have groceries. So, like, what did I do? Like, I was lucky we had squash growing. And, like, have you ever had, like, zucchini blossom fritters? So, like, when you have a zucchini plant, but there's male flowers, you can eat the male flowers. So, like, they don't grow a zucchini, they're just kind of like useless. So, you can pick them off, and they're kind of a delicacy. So, I would like stuff them with cheese and then like dip them in like batter. Like, I would make just like a flour garlic batter. So you stuff them with cheese, you dip them in batter, and then you fry them in the pan, and then you have, it's usually an appetizer, but like when you're starving and you have nothing and you just have zucchini blossoms, you can make like a meal out of that. So that's something I've done before. Okay, I found a picture of acorn squash. This is an acorn squash. Right there. That guy. They're really good for like stews and stuff. I've grown a couple before. They're kind of a bitch to chop though. Can I put a AAA battery up my nose? Probably. I'm not going to. But that's an interesting question. Rising Storm says be happy. I am pretty happy. Today I am. I'm color on my eyes. Everybody asks this every time. My eyes are green. Kool-Aid. You know, this live stream thing really puts a damper on my ability to distribute Kool-Aid to the cult parishioners. I'm really sorry, guys. You're gonna have to provide your own Kool-Aid. Do I work out? Yeah. Lately I've been running. And walking a ton. But I try to run a mile and a half at least half days a week. I know it's not very much. I used to run a lot more, but I'm kind of just trying to do whatever I can right now. I like working out when it's something fun. I love dancing. I love rock climbing. Those are my favorites. If I can climb a tree, like in a park, then I will. Or if there's an opportunity to climb a fence, like when I used to house sit, sometimes people would be like, I don't have a gate key to give you, you'll have to wait for someone to open the gate. And I'd be like, I can climb it, and then I would. I used to enjoy doing that. Or like, there have been times where I enjoy, like, if there was like a skate park where we were trying to stick our like band stickers, I would enjoy climbing the skate park fence at night after it had closed. Like, if I could find any opportunity that was safe, where I could get away with it, where I could climb, I did enjoy doing that. Foraging. Oh, there was an app that I used to have for foraging. When I used to be an ABA therapist, I used to keep my app for foraging open because I would have a lot of time between sessions. One of my favorite fruits to forage was strawberry tree fruit because you can't find that in a store. It's something you can only kind of find in the wild. And there's a lot of people who don't know they're edible. Let me see if I can find a picture. And then it turns out, okay, this is crazy. When my agency moved and bought a new building, there was like dozens of like strawberry tree fruit bushes growing outside of the agency. So it was like, oh my God, this is the greatest coincidence. Like, before I would walk in, I would go scan the bushes and I would pick off all the ripe ones, and they're so good. Okay, let me see. Strawberry. That was kind of crazy that happened. That was like a crazy awesome coincidence. Okay, strawberry tree fruit. Okay, here it is. This is what they look like. Now, please do not eat these if you don't know how to recognize them, but they are so good. Oh no, my feet. You saw my feet. It's out of the bag now. Okay, so if you see those, please don't do your research and make sure they're edible and not something else that's poisonous, but like, they are delicious. I love foraging. I love fruit. Like, someone said you just lit up from that memory. Like, picking fruit is like my favorite thing in the whole world. Like, there is just something really primal about picking fruit that you found that just like makes me so happy on a deep level. Like, if we had food forests, like, I feel like that's why capitalism doesn't want us to have food forests, because I would be so happy I wouldn't need to buy like 20 skincare items because I would have like a tangerine and that would be all that I needed, you know? I had this friend that I used to dance with, and he briefly had like, he had this ranch where he used it to like host retreats and like weddings and stuff. And then I was hanging out with him there right before he had to sell it, and he just let me go pick like all of the citrus off of all of the trees, and for like several hours I just picked like oranges, grapefruits, lemons, like everything. I was so happy. Like, I took home a bag and like he took the rest of the bags, but like just picking fruit is like my favorite thing. Have you ever tried Chinese lychees? Yes, I have. You know, they're not my favorite because they're a little bit floral, but once in a while I do enjoy them. I think as a novelty, but I wouldn't eat like a whole bucket of them, you know? Like, I would eat a whole bucket of watermelon, I would eat a whole bucket of mango, I would eat a whole bucket of grapes. With lychee, I could probably do like a handful, you know? Or like like, have you ever eaten strawberry guava? Like, I could eat a whole bucket of those probably. Mm. No, I'm sorry. This nose ring is a bitch to get back in because it has like an externally threaded like side. So I would have to unscrew this ball, and then like the threading is outside, so it kind of hurts the piercing when you take it out and in, so it's not coming out. I'm sorry. It's the best flower I like. Okay. Okay. So when there are, okay, so I love orchids as a potted plant because I can take care of them well. I love orchids. I love the blue ones and the purple ones, but I love them all. But to receive cut flowers, like, I'm not picky, I love everything, but when you can find like blue roses or rainbow roses, like, I just love those so much. Like, I know they're fake, but they're just like, oh my God, all the colors. There's just something very primal in me, just like, oh, I love them. Or like the daisies, where they're rainbow daisies, like all the petals are different colors, just drives me crazy. Just tons of color. I just love color. Lots of different colors. Love it. What's better, bread or McNuggets? It depends on the day. I don't really like McDonald's nuggets. Like, the texture is nice, but they feel like a brick in my stomach. And like, okay, my favorite nuggets, you know, the corn nuggets, they're actually vegetarian. But they're made of like a mushroom fungus that grows on corn. Those are my favorite nuggets. Um, and dino nuggets are okay, but like, oh man, I just swallowed something very fibrous, and like, I felt like I was swallowing a stick, and it's horrible. Give me a second. Do you ever just eat like child dinner? Or you're just eating chicken nuggets? Or like I'm lazy, but I'm trying to be on a diet, so I'm gonna put like 5 chicken nuggets over romaine salad. That's like so stupid. That's my life. That's my life, is being janky but trying to be healthy about it. Like, let's undo some of the damage here of my poor decision making. I don't know. Am I a teacher? Pedro asks. I used to be an ABA therapist, so I have some teacher energy. For like, I think it was like 6 years, I was working with kids with autism. So that was a lot of like teacher energy, just being very patient and waiting for them to follow directions and being very like, yeah, come on, let's do the thing, and not getting mad when they don't do the thing, and just like gently trying to encourage them to do the thing. So it was like for years. Um, Girl, Betterzen says, girl, you're living your best life. Enjoy your nugget salad. Yeah. Okay, another janky thing I used to eat that I loved. Okay. If you cook up like turkey burger or like a regular burger, but turkey burger is lower calorie, you put it on top of a salad. You mix up pickle juice with ketchup and mayo, and then you cut up a pickle. It tastes just like a protein style In-N-Out burger salad. And then if you saute a bunch of onions, you can make it animal style. Stupid thing that I love. That's living my best life. Eating like shitty healthy food. Pickle juice. Okay, pickle juice is like such an underrated condiment that it makes everything delicious. Recently, one of the dive bars that I went to, they have a pickle beer. It's like a really salty beer. You can't drink more than one of them, but it's still really cool. Have you ever had a pickle beer? It's shitty healthy food. It is shitty healthy food. It's like tasty. It's got flavor. But it's still got a ton of fiber. And it's not going to make you slip into diabetic coma. Shitty healthy food. So it tastes good. You can eat it. But it's not going to like ruin your life. My great grandma died of a heart attack. Like pretty young. So like, I don't know. These are things I think about. She used to put lard in all of her food. So like, there's that. I don't do that. But I don't know. No food is healthy if it makes you cry. Sometimes food makes you cry if it's delicious, though. Have you ever eaten something that was so good you felt like you were gonna cry? Like, what's the last thing I ate that was so good I wanted to cry? I feel like, oh, okay. Okay. I ate this, what was it? It was like, okay, someone took me out. It was so good. It was an appetizer where it was like this raw, what was it? It was some kind of raw meat, but they flavored it with like a lime juice, and then they served it with I'm really lucky to have been taken out to go to this place. Like I'm just gonna say that because I could have not have afforded this by myself. And then it was served with bone marrow. So you like take your crusty bread and then you like spread the bone marrow on it, and then you put this like it's kind of like steak tartare, but it wasn't steak. It was like bison or something, or like some kind of exotic meat. They flavored it with lime, and like you know when you take a bite of something good and you're like drooling, it's so good. Like I almost cried. It was that good. Yeah. I was pretty lucky. I'm pretty grateful for that dinner. It was incredible. It was on bread. The theme of the day is bread, but the bread wasn't the centerpiece. The bread was a bone marrow delivery device. And it came on a bed of polenta, and I'm pretty sure the polenta had so much duck fat in it. It was so good. You know it's good if you accidentally bite your finger. Yeah, that's true. Like, have you ever been so into eating something you like bite the inside of your mouth because you're just like chewing with such reckless abandon? It's like, oh, yeah. Yeah. What's the best meal you guys just ate? Man, my face is red. I was out in the sun today. I was at the beach all day. I kept my hat on, but I think it's actually this ring light. So like check it out. Um the ring light, if I put it this way, it's got like a little thing up top that blocks the camera and I don't like that, but it has a gentler light. But when I turn it around, oh here, I could do this actually. Okay, this is better. This is better. Now I think this will work. Okay, yeah. Now my face doesn't look that red. That's way better, right? Tan line's probably crazy. Yeah, I got a bad burn on my back. It's pretty embarrassing. So I have tan lines on my back now. But I'm less red. That looks so much better. Why didn't I think of that before? I don't know. What's my favorite book? Oh, my favorite book is the Xenogenesis series by Octavia Butler. It's 3 parts. I guess the first book is my favorite. It's called Dawn. It's a sci-fi book about there's this race of aliens that comes to try to save humanity after a nuclear war wipes out like 99% of the population. So the earth is destroyed. So they come to earth, they rescue like 60 people and then put them into like a cryogenically frozen state. And then the book is about when they wake up, some of them, they select a leader, and then she unfreezes like a dozen more people that she wants to be part of the group that repopulates the earth. But the condition is that they have to interbreed with the aliens because the aliens want their DNA. So it is a challenging sort of look at like, are we even human anymore? What does it mean to be a human? We have to like let go of a bunch of things that made us feel human in order to continue on the species. um so that's my favorite book. um Octavia Butler also wrote a bunch of other really cool books. One of them was there's a bunch of short stories. What was it called? There's a short storybook she did, which is very disturbing. It's Blood something, Blood Child, I think. And a lot of her themes of her stories have to do with reproduction and like the horrificness of reproduction, which I think I really resonate with a lot. Um, so I don't want to spoil that story because if I explained the title story Blood Child, it would spoil it. But that book is it's short and it's very disturbing. So if you like an unhinged bedtime story, you would probably like that book. But it's like a gut punch, like it'll get you. She also wrote I haven't finished this series, but she wrote Parable of the Sower, which is kind of a look at like what what future society might look like if we end up with water shortage. It's terrifying. So like don't read it if you already have anxiety. Um but I read the first one. I haven't read the second one, which is Parable of the Talents. Like I need to get to that eventually. But all of her books are good. I want to read everything she's ever written. Roy says, sounds like a documentary on Earth people. A lot of her books are kind of prophetic. Like she is so smart that I feel like she had foresight of like what was going to happen if things continued along the way they were. So like really worth a read if you think a lot about like climate disaster and like what's going to happen on this planet if things keep going the way they are. Like really good. Do I read stories every night? Pedro asks. No, not necessarily. Like sometimes I have other stuff to do, but I'm interested in doing more of this. It seems to be like what's working, but my concern is some of the stories I'm reading are copyrighted still. So I need to find stuff. Like I don't want to be another person that reads Lovecraft stories because like a lot of people do that. Um But I might, like, I know you can read like short snippets of things without getting your content removed. So maybe like I'll go back to reading like a chunk from my Geiger art book, like, or like reading a chunk from like the Dada art book or something. I love Lovecraft also. Would you listen to me would you listen to me do Lovecraft? I mean, everybody reads Lovecraft. I feel like it's been done before so many times. OnlyFans. I feel like my OnlyFans would be so boring. It's like I can describe the Eldritch horror while wearing a swimsuit or something. That would be my OnlyFans. Like I'll just read ridiculous stories. Would you pay $2.99 a month for that? No, I don't do OnlyFans. I'm kidding. It's like I'm trying to avoid doing OnlyFans. Like I don't know if I can. I don't want to do that. Sounds good, you say. I feel like maybe you guys can help me find something to do on OnlyFans that doesn't involve getting naked. Because remember when OnlyFans used to actually be like, oh, I'm gonna teach a skill. That's what it used to be. That's not what it is anymore. Yeah, it will ruin my life. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do that. I'd rather chill with you guys and tell you about what fruits I like to forage. That's what I enjoy doing. Gosh, we've been around almost 2 hours. I've got to find something else I can do. Um, Back in the day. Um, oh, okay. Did you guys ever have a rock tumbler? I had a rock tumbler when I was a kid. I don't think I ever figured out how to work it properly. Because, like, you're supposed to put a bunch of rocks in the rock tumbler and then you run it and they come out all shiny and smooth. But I don't think I did it properly. Well, my family used to get me all these really sciencey gifts as a kid. Like, one time I had like a cave painting gift set. It came with like it was like a paintbrush that was made out of like a twig with like these coarse horse hairs, right? And then there were a bunch of these like chalky pigments, and you had to like crumble them down, and then you could like draw these like cave pictures on your cement. But I don't know. I never really figured out how to use it. I wasn't good at that kind of thing. I also had a chemistry set my mom never let me use. Um, what else? I feel like the only toy I was ever allowed to use was when my mom brought home an NES. What else? What are the weird toys that I have? Do I play games? There was a very long period of my life where I was deeply obsessed with SimCity 2000. Do you guys ever play SimCity or SimCity 4 or The Sims? Like like there was a time in my life where I spent about 12 hours a day playing SimCity 2000. Is it an old game? Yeah, I got my first copy around 1999 or 2000. I got mine, it was on PlayStation. You could get it on Super Nintendo, but it was mainly a PC game. But I played it on PlayStation for years before I had a laptop. And then I played it on a laptop. Shake it. Is that good enough? Shake it. Shake it. Shake it. Shake it like a Polaroid picture. I know, right? Okay. Nobody cares about SimCity 2000. I guess it's just me. I'm old. I play on PS4, Sims 4. I never played Sims 4. SimCity 4 and Sims 1, 2, and 3 were an obsession. It's the only game you had. And then, oh, Civilization. Civilization 4 and 5 were an obsession for a while. Did you ever play Civ 4? Am I transgender? No. No, I'm just not wearing any makeup. And I have a low voice. This is what women look like without makeup. This is what I look like without makeup. I saw someone made a comment earlier like, oh, she's a very brave trans woman. And that's hilarious. That's fucking funny. I've never. I will never be offended by being misgendered. So, like, that's fine. More of a hiking, outdoorsy kind of guy. I don't really play games, Ulysses says. Yeah, these days I like being outdoors. Like, spending all day at the beach lately is kind of top notch. Someone asked, can you say my name? I'll say your name if you say something funny. Tell me about yourself. Tell me something unique about yourself, and I'll say your name. Dixon Cunt says, you mean Mr. Gendered. Haha, clever. Clever girl you are. Ashley says, I like snakes. Do you have a snake, Ashley? Snakes are a cool pet. They're like very low maintenance. Oh, that reminds me of a story. There was this time in college, I had a friend who kept some very interesting pets. And she had a snake. And we were all kind of chilling in the living room. We were playing Smash Brothers. Probably like this was Melee era. And I remember asking if I could hold the snake. So I had the snake in my lap. And then somebody like handed me a controller. Like someone died and they're like, oh, okay, it's your turn. So they hand me the controller. So I got the snake in my lap. I'm playing Super Smash Brothers Melee. I'm like not paying attention. I die. My last stock dies, and I look down in my lap. The snake is slithering off my lap, and I see the tail disappear into one of the cushions, and I'm like, oh shit. So, long story short, like we were reaching our arms up inside the couch. We couldn't find the snake. We had to cut the back of the couch open to like pull off the layer of fabric to get the snake back out. And like the most embarrassing thing about this was just like a week prior, um, she was on vacation and she had asked me to watch her chinchilla. And so she asked me to take her chinchilla into the kitchen and just like let her run around and like give her treats and stuff. So like I was watching the chinchilla the week prior and like all of a sudden the chinchilla disappears up under the stove and I just like my friend was there with me and we look at each other like, oh my fucking god, like is the gas on? Is the chinchilla gonna go up in flames? So I had to like lead the chinchilla out with a trail of raisins and get the chinchilla out from under the stove. I was panicked. So like these are my early days before I started as a house sitter and a cat sitter and like I don't know, man. I'm never letting exotic pets out into the house space anymore. Like that's my heart, my brain can't take it. I feel like I'm gonna have an aneurysm if something like that happens again. What the hell is a chinchilla? Phil asks. I'll pull up a picture. It's like a little rodent. They like take dust baths. They're very cute. They're very cute. If you look up on TikTok, chinchilla taking dust baths, You will not regret watching a chinchilla take a dust bath. Okay. This is a chinchilla. Look at this guy. Oh my god. Look at his little face. They have these beady little eyes and these like ugh, stupid little ears. And they're like, they are all fuzz. So like you can't get them wet because they will basically get all moldy. Like their fur is so thick that it won't dry. You have to keep them completely dry. But if you pick them up, you'll feel that they're all fluff and their tiny bodies inside are just like so small. So they're just adorable. They're difficult pets to keep though. They need a special environment. They're a little skittish, so like they're definitely like a high skill pet. Like I wouldn't keep one, but they're cool when someone else has them. They're very, very fluffy. Oh my God. Your cousin has a chinchilla, Ashley. That's cool. Do you ever pick it up? Do you ever hold the chinchilla? Yeah, you hold the chinchilla. They're a little weird, right? I wonder if my snake would eat one. I'm pretty sure a snake would eat a chinchilla if it could, if it was big enough. I thought that it was a mouse. It is. It is kind of like, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's a slightly different family than a mouse. I'm not really sure. My friend had crazy creatures all the time. My favorite was his poison dart. He had poison dart frogs. I really want one at some point. They're so small. Ashley says I have to go. Bye, Ashley. Thank you for joining me. Okay. You had poison dart frogs. I heard that a lot of poison dart frogs that you buy as pets aren't actually poisonous because when you feed them, like you're not feeding them the things they would need to eat in the wild that would make them poisonous. So like I heard that a lot of poison dart frogs, like they look cool, but the pet ones aren't poisonous. But that's just what I hear. I went to a reptile show a couple years ago and that's what they told me. It says, Bethrazen says, yeah, I held them and I felt no ill effects. That's cool. I want to hold a poison dart frog. Also, there's like glass frogs. Have you ever seen glass frogs? Like, if you look at their undersides, like they, their undersides are totally clear. Like, you can see their heart beating inside them, you can see their liver, and like, it's pretty wild. They're very cute though. What else? Can't believe you guys are still hanging out. I guess animals are super cute. We could discuss those all night. I could go on and on about my favorite animals that I wish I had as pets. Pedro had a good idea. Go live on your walk, market, voice, motivation talk. Yeah, I feel like if I could just become one of those manifestation coaches, like I could totally just like, I don't know, ramble. But like, I don't know. I feel like I don't have like a cohesive message like Abraham Hicks does. Like, I feel like I wouldn't want to brand myself as like one thing that I have to talk about all the time. That would get so boring. And also, I feel like I would just start bullshitting. Like, I wouldn't take myself seriously or believe it. Rising storm asks, what state do I live in? I live in California. I live in California. I grew up in Los Angeles. Um, you live in, what did you say? CLCA. California is abbreviated CA. Oh yeah, so like here's a story that I tell a lot on like this podcast I did, but so like when I was growing up, um I worked at this restaurant when I was a teenager, and like sometimes celebrities would come in and like so like one time I never waited on well I only waited on oh, what was her name? I waited on Jada Pinkett Smith once. She brought in Willow on her birthday, and they brought in like 38-year-old girls. It was Willow's like 8th or ninth birthday, and I waited on them. Like I brought them their burgers and stuff. So that was like a weird thing that happened to me. She was very nice. I have nothing bad to say about her whatsoever. Um, I don't know if it's a gift so much as they're bored, Pedro. I don't think I have a gift. I just like having company and I like hearing myself talk. So people are hanging out and that's cool. Um, I told this story on a podcast once. So like Travis Barker used to come into the restaurant where I worked, and like one time he abruptly got up and left before his food arrived, and so someone stuck his burger in the break room, and I saw a burger in the break room and I started eating it, and someone came up and was like, "That's Travis Barker's burger." Like it's my burger now. I'm eating it. So one time a friend of mine got to wait on Randy Jackson. This was around the time he was a judge on American Idol at the time. So that was pretty cool. She was really excited to wait on him because she liked to sing and she really wanted to be on American Idol one day. So that was cool. Um, I feel like there were others, but like it's been so long I can't really remember. But it didn't even occur to me at the time, like how cool that was until I got older and was like, oh, that was cool. You don't see celebrities around San Diego anymore. And I didn't realize when I lived in Los Angeles, like, that was like interesting. I don't know if you know what I mean. Anyway, I didn't really appreciate it at the time. Let's see. What else? Um, Trying to think of anything else interesting. It's like there's no celebrities up here. I saw Charlize Theron once at a movie theater. It's interesting. Did you leave her alone? Did you go up to her? Can you back up, please? Yeah. It's hard for me to see the chat. It's like my contact lenses are a little blurry, so I can't see what you guys are saying when I'm this far away. Being held back by three of my friends. Yeah. Oh, I think I got disconnected for a minute. Um, what else? I feel like I've got to have another story somewhere. Um, it might be all of them. I feel like, oh man, I should go soon. I don't have any more stories, but there's still people hanging out. It was great hanging out with you guys. I'm getting boring, so I'm gonna go. But you guys are really cool. I will join you on another evening. We'll have more to share. Dig deep. Yeah, I'll have to dig deep and come up with some stories because I'm running on fumes now. But thank you guys for being here. I'll come back with more unhinged stories. Hopefully, see you guys Thursday. Tomorrow, I'm supposed to go to an open mic. We'll see if I make it. I might be too tired. I should. I should go. Okay. Thank you guys. I'll see you in a couple days. Have a good night.